you drive by the Presbyterian Church on Cambridge Street in Burlington, you may wonder what makes it unique. I didn't know it traces its roots back to the Church of Scotland and still has some Scottish influences today. I was surprised to learn how culturally diverse this community is, welcoming a growing number of parishioners from West Africa and countries around the world where Presbyterians had established missions. Today we will meet Reverend Trina Portillo, who was installed as the pastor of the church in February of 2018. She will talk about the core beliefs of her faith and give us a tour of the church. Reverend MacDonald, who served as the pastor of the congregation for 35 years, will tell us a bit about its history. Members of the congregation will tell us what makes their community so special.
This church is wonderful, and I got my baptism here, and people are nice to me.
Welcome to Spiritually Speaking.
Though the time be far, I know that come it will, when each nation shall each other bless, and peace the earth shall fill. God shall reign over the earth on that day. God shall be one, and your name it shall be one.
Trina, it's great to have you join us today, and it's a pleasure to have you with us. I've only known you for a short period of time, but I can tell that we're going to be good friends, and you're a big asset to our community, the Burlington community, and to our interfaith community. So welcome. And
thank you.
I just wanted to ask you a little bit about your journey to becoming the minister at the Presbyterian Church in Burlington.
I went to McCormick Seminary in Chicago. It's one of, I think, 10 seminaries that are affiliated with the denomination that I belong to. When I finished seminary, I did a 2-year residency program in parish ministry. I went back to Rochester, New York, where I had grown up, and I worked, I was a solo pastor there at a small church for about 2 years, and then my husband was transferred or took a job here in the Boston area at Boston College, so we moved out here, and I came to serve at Burlington Presbyterian Church in February of 2016, and I initially came as the temporary supply pastor while they were in transition between we call it called and installed pastors, who's the permanent pastor of the church. And after being there for a while, I realized that I really loved the church, and applied to be considered to stay as the new installed pastor, and I was called in February of this year.
What makes Presbyterianism unique among Protestant denominations?
My mother is from Scotland, and the Church of Scotland is the Presbyterian Church. So that is where the Presbyterian denomination sort of traces its roots during the Reformation period to first John Calvin and then John Knox, who was a reformer in Scotland. We believe in one God in 3 persons, and that Jesus Christ was the Son of God, and the Holy Spirit is the active presence of God in the world that kind of moves in and among us. The act of Jesus Christ dying on the cross for the sins of the world, that in itself is the salvific act. We don't earn our own salvation. So it's not a merit-based system. There is grace and there is forgiveness, but our response in gratitude for that grace is to live according to how God, through Christ, teaches us how to live.
So we should do good deeds out of gratitude.
Yeah.
Not out of fear of not going to heaven.
Not out of trying to get to heaven. What I believe Jesus was teaching his disciples is that the kingdom of heaven is here.
In this life, in this
yes,
world.
Yes. I don't have an image of a literal gatekeeper in an otherworldly realm, be it heaven or hell, who says you're in or you're out. One of the other hallmarks of the Presbyterian Church is freedom of conscience. And that has played out in some of the more contentious conversations the church has had over the years, whether it be the ordination of women, the ordination of LGBT persons in the church, same-sex marriage, all those kinds of things, that it ultimately comes down to freedom of conscience. So an individual has the right and the ability to determine for him or herself if they feel that something is in line with their beliefs or not. Jesus, and therefore God, was always on the side of the marginalized and oppressed. And I think that goes back to the Hebrew scriptures too, that we see that throughout the Hebrew scriptures, that God is always saying, you take care of the widow and the orphan and the resident alien in your land, and remember that you were slaves in Egypt. That carries right through to what Jesus' life and ministry and teachings were about.
Thank you so much, and
Okay.
let's head over to the church.
Great, I can't wait to show you. So here we are at the Presbyterian Church in Burlington. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, we're very excited to show you inside and tell you a little bit more about the history and the life of this church. So
Can't wait to see it.
come on in. So this is our sanctuary, and as you enter the front door, you walk right into the worship space. So we gather here every Sunday morning for worship, and the worshipers sit in these pews out here. And this area up front is called the chancel. Reading and preaching the word is the centerpiece of our worship service and our life together. So this is the pulpit, and this is where the word is read and proclaimed. So the liturgical year has different colors for different seasons and particular festival days. Red is the color of the Holy Spirit for Pentecost, which we just celebrated, and Pentecost is the coming of the Holy Spirit upon the first believers. This right here is our communion table, also called the Lord's table, and this is where we celebrate the Lord's Supper or communion. We celebrate that once a month on the first Sunday of the month, and we practice an open table here. Anyone who is a believer in Jesus Christ is welcome to come to the table and receive communion. As the minister, I would preside here and say the blessings and the prayers over the bread and the cup. And then we would have servers who come forward and take the trays and pat the trays of bread and then the trays of juice, which we use in our tradition. We don't use wine, we use grape juice, so that we can be as inclusive as possible of everyone who wishes to partake. These are our offering plates, and so every Sunday we receive an offering, and it is the congregation's way of supporting the ministry and mission of the church. And we also have offering envelopes out front for the children, who bring those forward when they come up for the time with children, which is on the steps. This is where we celebrate the sacrament of baptism. And inside there is a bowl that we would fill with water.
Is it special water, like
No.
blessed water, or just?
No, it's not. I say a prayer over the water and ask the Holy Spirit to be present.
What is the significance of somebody being baptized?
So when a person is baptized, we believe that they are received into the family of God and marked as God's own forever. So we say that they've received the sign and the seal of the Holy Spirit. And so in our tradition, we practice infant baptism as well as baptism of people who are making their own profession of faith, who are baptized later, either as a young adult or later in their adult years. When the child grows older, we have a ritual called confirmation, which is where it's usually a teenager would make their own profession of faith and become a full adult member of the church at that time. So up here in this area is the choir loft, and our choir sits here behind the organ. We have tables set up for our bell choir, which ring handbells for occasional worship services. My favorite feature of our sanctuary is the stained glass window that's behind us.
It's beautiful.
It has lots of different colors in it, which I think represents the multicultural nature of the church, even though when the church was built, that wasn't really part of its fabric. It is now. And it has several different symbols in it that I think are very interesting. Right up at the top, there is a blue butterfly symbolizing the resurrection, two hands clasping one another in friendship, which are a black hand and a white hand. And I think that that says a lot about this church, that even in 1962, when it was founded, racial reconciliation was important to the people who started this church. This map in our front hallway is set up to show where people in our church have come from, where either they were born or they trace their family heritage to. So you can see we have several countries in West Africa represented. We have Kenya and Uganda. We have one member who's from Syria originally. Some up here in Europe, Western Europe, one Eastern Europe, Korea, the Philippines, Indonesia, India. We have a couple from Central or South America, and then North America and Canada. Welcome to my office.
Thank you.
This book was given to me for my installation here by the church, and it has the Lord's Prayer in several different languages that are represented by people of the church. This is the symbol of the Presbyterian Church USA, and this was the symbol when the Northern Church and the Southern Church reunited in 1983 after they had split during the Civil War. This symbol has a lot of different symbols within it. So you can see the overall image is a cross.
Yep.
The dove at the top is to symbolize the Holy Spirit. The flames represent the fire of the Holy Spirit and the birth of the church at Pentecost. This beautiful little garden area, which is lovingly maintained by some of our members, and the bush in the center is trimmed in the shape of the cross. This is our classroom for young children, pre-K through first grade. When the kids leave worship after the time with children, they would come to their classrooms with their teachers. This is our fellowship hall, where we have gatherings every Sunday after worship and also host other events for the community here. Recently, we've started offering equal exchange products for sale after worship, coffee, tea, chocolate, and other fair trade products.
One of our longtime projects has been the CSA Mission, where we host 2 CSA programs that help us provide sustainable and healthy food to the community. We have hosted Farmer Dave from Dracut with his fruits and vegetable CSA program, and a few years ago we added eggs and meat from Lilac Hedge Farm in Holden. We picked these 2 farms because of their dedication to sustainable farming procedures that helps secure the use of farmland for future generations.
On Christmas Eve, our children put on a Christmas pageant where they dress up to represent the different roles that are portrayed in the Christmas story. At the end of the service, the light is passed to everyone in the sanctuary, and we sing Silent Night together. Very moving and peaceful to see the whole sanctuary and everyone's faces lit by candlelight. On Easter, there's a tradition of hosting a breakfast. We have just a really wonderful time of hospitality and friendship and community prior to the Sunday morning service, where we celebrate the resurrection of Christ.
It's my pleasure to be here with Reverend Rod MacDonald, who's the former pastor of the Presbyterian Church, and he was the pastor there for 35 years. So I want to just ask you if you could tell us a little bit about the history of the Presbyterian Church.
The church was organized beginning in 1960, which of course was when Burlington itself was expanding, mushrooming, and a pastor named Dick Dowse, came to do the organizing work. In the Presbyterian system, churches are not independent entities, not lone rangers, but they're part of presbyteries. And so the presbytery, which now is called Boston Presbytery, was the presbytery to actually formally charter the church. And that happened about 2 years after Dick started his work and had drawn a sizable enough congregation. We were kindly hosted back in the beginning at the United Church of Christ, their facility, and then I believe for several years the congregation used the old Wildwood School, which is no more in Burlington, until the church itself was built in 1965. And they had quite a music ministry, and that was one of the things that really built that congregation in the early days. And of course, just the fact that Burlington was growing so fast meant that the church grew pretty quickly too. In the late 70s, there was quite a shift, and there was a bit of a split. In 1979 was when the church called me to come as their pastor.
Is it correct to say that the church is a very social action-minded place and responded to many of the issues which came up over the years that you were there?
I think it has that tradition. It does. One of the challenges always for that church here in Burlington was that for Presbyterians, there aren't a lot of churches in New England itself. So many people traveled from other towns to come to this church in Burlington. So it didn't have the appearance of being a real community-based church, and yet it was very involved in community things. Despite that fact, much to its credit. So that when the People Helping People organization began and the food pantry and so on.
Can you talk a little bit about the diversity of your church? Because it appears to be quite diverse. So how did that evolve?
Well, very nicely, actually. And I guess in some ways, much like our society, it had been pretty much a majority white congregation for its early years. Then I would say, the mid-90s or late 90s, there began to be some visitors who came from other countries. In particular, some folks who had immigrated from Ghana. If I could add,
yes.
Just how much I've always valued the interfaith relationships here in Burlington. They were always very strong, and it's really, really good to see that they're continuing to be so strong.
And I also have to add that you and your wife were one of the strongest supporters of the Jewish community in all those years, and there were many issues which we as a Jewish community had to face in the Burlington area, and you were the first two to step up, and even without us stepping up, the two of you took the lead in confronting issues to make us feel more comfortable in the area. So we thank you very much for that.
It was our honor.
What I love most about Presbyterian Church is they've always shown me to be a group of people who are not unwilling to get their hands dirty. They are always willing to fill a need, to serve a community, and that's what I like, because to me, faith isn't faith without the action behind it.
When we came in and we're having service, and they call the word for children. And when I look, I saw this little black boy pass by me. I said, whoa, this is a black guy. But then let me look back. When I look back of me, I found the whole group of black people from Africa. Then I said, wow, this is my church. I have found a home, and here I'm going to remain.
I've been involved as an elder and a deacon and a Sunday school teacher and the mother of 2 daughters who were both confirmed in this church. So it's been really important in our family life. I was not Presbyterian growing up, found the church partly because it's the closest to my house, and people were very welcoming from the very beginning. So it has felt always like my community, and being part of this community has furthered my faith journey.
When I discovered this church, I knew that it was a very good church because there are very many people here who are very receptive.
I'm always so happy. I belong to this church from the beginning. I came here to America.
I met Pastor Rod, and he's been our grace, and this church has been our grace ever since.
They are happy with me and they are sad with me when things are not going well.
Everybody in the church came and said hello to me, and I felt so good, and I've been coming here ever since.
Thank you for joining us. I hope you learned about the Presbyterian faith and this church's passion for justice and acceptance of people from all cultures around the world. May we all learn to be as accepting and loving of one another as they are. Shalom, salam, shanti, peace.